So a timer seemed to work. During editing the last couple of videos, it seemed about right. So if anyone's watching this and they want to chime in on whether they thought that the more recent 10-minute videos were better, I'll take the feedback. All right. So today there were a few things I was wanting to talk about, but I will narrow that down to one. I wanted to quickly follow up on the previous video. As I was editing it, I was noting, I'm just looking at, I have some wording here that I wanted to kind of put down. As I was noting, toward the end of it, it kind of derailed a little bit from my standard style, I guess, of describing things. I don't know, just my standard style. And I noted, there was a lot more emotional content toward the end of there. Like, oh, okay, so I get emotionally invested in this somehow for some reason. It was just kind of something I noted, and I'm like, why is it that I was so emotionally invested in this? And it was interesting because the way I was describing, it was like the people who hold to those beliefs, it's like I could never relate to them, or I could never, and that's not true. I have a lot of friends who I would say fall into that category. A lot of my family members I would say fall into that category. And I have no problems with those people, but I guess I don't have a whole lot in common at an intellectual level with those type of people, I suppose. Those are not the type of people I could marry and spend the rest of my life with. Or, it's not the type of person I could have those conversations with over and over, day in, day out, because I just don't feel like they're willing to put forth the amount of intellectual effort in order to get themselves to a position where those conversations can occur. And I mean, it sounds kind of conceited or even pedantic, but I mean, that's just, that's what I look for in people that I'm going to have in common with me are people who are going to share the similar interests as myself, and my interests are to investigate and think about these things and really push myself mentally. So, I mean, I guess just the way it is, I could see someone who maybe is more passionate about whatever, say fitness, someone who's super passionate about fitness, and then they can get emotionally invested in people being lazy and not willing to put forth the effort to to get up every morning and go to the gym and all this kind of stuff. I guess I can relate in that sense. I think it's kind of interesting that we get emotionally invested that way. I think some of my frustration is due to the fact that I find it difficult to find and make friends, like close acquaintances, and again, people I can hang out with, and you can go to a party, play board games with, or you can just go to the zoo, or I've got plenty of those people, and I guess that they're friends. But I'm talking about like true kinship, right? Like somebody who you can identify with, and you share ideas with, and like experience, like these really deep and meaningful experiences of life transforming, that kind of stuff. No, I don't make those types of friends very well, or at all, really. And that's something I miss. Like, that's something I long for. And one of the things, okay, I kind of drifted off topic, but that's okay. The point of these videos are to just get the ideas out there, and then I can later come back and organize it all. The reason I really like the little blurb I have here is I think for a lot of people, the scope is just outside of what they're, I don't want to say willing to comprehend, but it's almost to that point. So let me give you an example. You talk about like the number of stars in the universe, like or even just the night sky, like the amount of stars that you can see with a telescope, it's breathtaking. And to think of how many planets are around each one of those, and you start putting these numbers together, and people throw around millions and billions because there's millionaires and billionaires, or that we're in so many trillions of dollars of debt, but they don't really grasp how big that number is. I know they don't. They just can't. There's no way that you can grasp that large of a number so flippantly in regards to certain things. Like, obviously, just $1 trillion is $1 trillion, but when you say like how much can happen over 1 billion years? How much can happen over 10 years even? You know, imagine this, and this is where my little thing is. Imagine, or just ask yourself, and that, you know, I ask myself, but ask yourself, what is the longest that you've devoted to any single project in your life? And hobby, anything, but a single project. So not like your career, like one thing you've done in a career. Okay, say maybe you were designing a car, like, right? And you weren't even the one who fully did it. Say you're just working on a team, but you were designing a car, and you put forth, say it took 4 years for you to design that car. That's a 4-year project, and you imagine the expertise that you had on that car after those 4 years, right? Like, there's just so much depth, right? Now imagine doing that, but you're the only one designing the car, and it took you, say, 50 years. Can you imagine the level of understanding, the intricate, it's so mind-boggling to me to think of somebody who's worked on one particular thing for their entire life, but, you know, for the most, you know, like their career, but they're not just their career, like their passion, their everything. This is something that they've devoted their life to for some reason, and it's probably a reason that you or I cannot comprehend because we're not that level of genius. But there's something that they've attached themselves to, and they've worked their entire life, and their passion and their hobby, and that's what they did for their entire life. The amount of data in their head, the amount of understanding of the nuances of that topic. Can you even wrap your head around that? Because it's hard for me to. Like, I can start imagining, but really wrap my head around it. Now imagine that person is way harder working than you. They're way smarter than you. They're way more driven than you. Like, all their depths and impact is way beyond anything you can do. So clearly I'm talking about our Einsteins, our Newtons, you know, these people who changed the world around us forever. These are the things I'm talking about. Can you even begin to grasp that scope of work? And until you can, I have a hard time thinking that you can come up with reasonable arguments against the conclusions that these people have made, right? So let's just take Newton as an example. Newton, he came up with what we call the classical description of the mechanics of the universe, the physics of the universe. How, you know, when you throw an object, how it behaves, and when it's sitting at rest, how it behaves, and what it takes to get it in motion, and all that kind of stuff. He put together a framework for describing how everything works, and it wasn't perfect. And, you know, as I mentioned, Einstein later came along and said, there's actually something else going on here, and then we've later discovered some more nuances again. But the foundation that he put in place is just captivating to anybody who knows anything about, like, there's nobody who's like, oh, Newton was just worthless, right? Like, he was just captivating. It changed our world. And it seems to me foolish for just some person to come by and say Newton's work was total garbage because of the experiences I've had in my own, well, that was probably sorry about that, the experiences I've had in my own life. And you're like, well, yeah, you may have had some experiences that you can't explain with Newton's work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Newton was wrong. But then, you know, the anti-argument of that, well, but then Einstein did show that he was wrong, that he wasn't fully correct. But you're no Einstein, right? And so these people who come along with these, you know, like the example I think I had given was the giraffe's neck. In evolutionary terms, I've heard people say that the giraffe's neck is evolutionarily impossible. There's the way that the blood flows through it would cause problems if they were to bend over to eat or drink or whatever, and so the way that neck would have evolved is not possible. And, you know, again, my whole last video was around, like, what do you mean? Like, that's just so meaningless. And to me, that is like saying to Newton, you know, force is not equal to MA because when I fell down the other day, it didn't hurt that hard. You know, like, it's just so weird, and it's not relevant. It's just not relevant. It doesn't mean anything in the full scope of things. because you have no idea. And go and spend a lifetime studying the giraffe's neck and evolutionary, like run it through tons of AI computer simulation models of generations of interbreeding with other evolutionary things along the way. Do this for the next 50 years and then come back and tell me. And until you do that, oh, it's time to dismiss. It's probably good because I'm basically done. Yeah, by the time you've done that, by the time you spent 50 years simulating that stuff and really truly diving into how the biology works and how everything, and don't ignore evolution. Don't just try and counter it. Like take everything in with an open mind. Say if evolution is correct, see where it takes you. If evolution is not correct, see where it takes you. Do that for 50 years. Then we can have that conversation. And I'm not saying that I've spent 50 years on evolution. What I'm saying is you take that Bayesian statistic, you adjust it based off of the data you have. And the data that I'm pulling from is data that people have spent 50 years of their life putting together. And it's legitimate data. You can go and reproduce the data. Like I can go and reproduce their experiments. They've given me the instructions on how to do it. And so if there's something wrong with what they've done, I am free to improve upon it. That's what I'm talking about. That's where I'm building my statistical Bayesian probability distribution for. I'm making inferences. What's the most likely, the correct way to do it? I'm using that data that I can go and reproduce. Now, I haven't done it all. And if anything ever gets pulled into question, I can. So my Bayesian distribution also takes that into account. Like, yeah, I'm not positive about evolution because I haven't gone through and done 50 years of my own work. But I'm pretty convinced.